Hello, everybody. I am an undergrad in the kinesiology department, and I got the opportunity to do a research internship for my last semester in the biomechanics department. I highly recommend research if y'all are able to do it. So I'm going to explain a little bit about the research that I've done called the effects of tibialis anterior fatigue on balance. So what is our tibialis anterior? It is the muscle on the front lower portion of our leg. It helps lift up our foot, which we call dorsiflexion. It assists in gait, which is walking. So when we strike our heel onto the ground, it helps with like the loading. And then when we move our weight onto our foot, it helps to kind of slow our foot down. And when we swing our leg, as we learned, dorsiflexion helps lift up our toes so we don't trip. How many of us have tripped? All the time, right? We don't want to do that. So to be able to walk properly, we have to be able to maintain our balance. When we walk, we stand on one leg for a small point of time, but we do it every single day. We walk upstairs, which requires a little bit more balance. And there are some very important components to balance. So our visual, so our eyes, our ears, which is called vestibular, and our proprioception, which is basically knowing where our bones are in space, which I'm not so good at. So our proprioception has been shown to be a strong indicator of our balance ability, and we'll also be looking at sway, which is where our center of mass, we're going to use that to measure balance directly. So sway is basically our center of gravity over our base of support and how far away from our base of support it goes over time. So how many of us have had a really hard workout and been really tired afterwards and we just cannot make our limbs move? All of us, right? We get so tired, we're like, we're done, I can't do this anymore. So when we were looking at research, we found that there is not a lot on fatigue with our tibialis anterior and our effects on balance, which we would think that would be important. So that came to our purpose for this study, which is to examine the effects that TA fatigue had on balance. We hypothesized that our sway would increase post-fatigue, our dorsiflexion range of motion, so how much we can lift our foot from that 90 degrees position upwards, and a decrease in proprioception, so where our bones are in space. So we recruited young, healthy participants that didn't have any issues with health. They were not pregnant. They had no restrictions to exercise. And this was a little bit about our protocol. So I want to show you what our participants had to go through. So we did balance assessments, performance assessments, fatigued them, and then repeated those balance and performance assessments. Here's the machines. This was how we did our balance assessments, and I'll show you what they did. So they did a unilateral stance where they stood on one leg. They did a sit to stand, which we are all going to do later, sitting up from our chairs. They also did a step quick turn, which is just turning around. And then here's our torture machine. It's actually not that scary. But on this machine, we measured range of motion and proprioception and did our fatigue protocol. And here's how we strapped them in. It's getting scarier, sorry. But they got to play a game. So this is what they got to play when we were fatiguing their leg. So what did we get from all of that? So here's this very boring chart that y'all get to stare at for a second. Those bolded figures are actually what we got that were significant so far. So here's another chart. It's a little bit easier to look at, but it's percent change. So if those bars are going downwards, that means they increased post-fatigue. And if they are going upwards, that means they decreased post-fatigue. And so one of the ones that we didn't see highlighted was our symmetry, which is when we stood up from our sit to stand, how much weight each leg was bearing. It actually changed a lot per participant, but we didn't see it change for the group average. That's why it wasn't significant. So each participant had a big change side to side, but not on average. They kind of canceled each other out. So what can we learn about all that really boring stuff? So it means we saw an increase with sway post-fatigue on our sit to stand. We do sit to stands every single day. We all got up out of our car. If we drive, we're gonna sit up later We get up out of our bed every day. This is a simple everyday task. And if we're seeing in a young, healthy population these changes, it means that we have a higher chance of falling. Okay. We also saw that while not significant, their weight transfer, they stood up quicker and they changed where they normally balance. So they're avoiding that posture that would stress out their leg and cause them to be tired more, even if they're not thinking about it. Now, on our step quick turn, this is a difficult movement. And while we expected them to have more trouble, they actually balanced better. So we saw a decrease in sway, which is not what we were expecting. So we believe this is because they were concentrating very, very hard. They knew that they had a chance of falling. So they concentrated very hard to make sure that they did not on that movement. What does this mean? What can we kind of collect from this? We can assume that like if somebody has weakened muscles or if they are fatigued and they're doing a simple task, they may have a higher risk of falling. So getting up from bed, getting out of our car. But if they are not aware that they are fatigued, if they are aware they are fatigued and they're doing a harder task, they're going to be more careful. But as we can see, on our unilateral stance, there was an increase in sway. So this is a hard task. Even though they were concentrating a lot, we still saw an increase in sway. So you can't concentrate your way out of not falling. It does not work. And we also see proprioception and our range of motion decreased. So they weren't able to tell where their feet are in space. And they also were not able to lift up their foot as much, which we saw earlier with gait is very important for being able to walk properly. So they're going to have trouble lifting up their foot and they could trip. This was in a young, healthy population. We actually saw that when they were switching machines, they fell. Most of our participants had at least one trip, if not multiple trips. And in an older, healthy population, multiple trips are known to lead to an increased fall risk. We also know that sway increases linearly with age, as young as age 30. That means our balance is affected as early as age 30. And of the healthy older population over age 65, they already have some form of trouble with balance or walking. And you can't really see it, but in the US, non-fatal and fatal falls cost us $50 billion annually. So that's a lot. So what can we do to stop some of that healthcare cost, stop some of us from falling when we're young and when we're old? Because nobody wants to see grandma in the hospital, right? That's awful. So we can start by strengthening our anterior tibialis. We can include this in our strengthening routines today, tomorrow. We can help our parents and our grandparents strengthen their feet and their legs, and we can include this in therapy. I don't know how many have done physical therapy. Yes. Do you ever see them strengthening, like lifting up their foot with a band? Normally they just make you, yes, good. They're doing it the right way. So this is how we can reduce that fall risk in older populations.